Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Safe to be Scared, How Thrillers Benefit the Kids section, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2026 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Good to go? I think we're good to go. All right. Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday of Winter Institute. Thanks so much for showing up for our panel. We're excited to talk to you about scary books. Yeah. Okay. Welcome. We got to do housekeeping. You can access the slides through your app. Tell us how we did in the survey. I'll remind you again at the end, but please, they really, really love for you guys to do the survey. Let them know if it was enough, not enough. Recordings will be on BookWeb and Books. Silence your cell phones, and questions will be at the end. Then antitrust. Everyone read it? Good. Okay. So these are the objectives. This is what we're hoping that you will take away from this panel. You can just take a quick glance through those, and then we're going to kind of go through them one by one. Okay, introductions. My name is Rebecca Crosswhite. I am co-owner and children's buyer for Rediscovered Books in Boise, Idaho. And I love scary books. I'm the children's buyer and children's specialist, and I'm also the grown-up horror specialist. So I like both.
Hi, I'm Stacy Barney. I'm associate publisher at Nancy Paulson Books at Penguin Young Readers. Very pleased to be here.
I'm Nancy Elwood. I'm the children's publisher at Arcadia Publishing out of Charleston.
And I'm Lauren Comer. I'm the co-owner of The Twisted Spine in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, so we all like scary books is what we're saying. So horror has been around for a really long time. It's like OG genre. And we talk about how long it's been around when we go to like the ways that they used horror in the past. So does anyone have any ideas of like I think immediately of Grimm's tales, and how that was used to keep kids in bed at night because it was dangerous if they left the house. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's a matter of keeping them in the house, but also in line. You know, if you misbehave, this such and such is going to get you. And those, you know, were elaborated on through families, through cultures. I think every culture has their version of the boogeyman who's scary. I think it's a threat, which I don't know if you have kids. We still do it in different ways. But I think that's the origination of this stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely about the big, scary, bad in the dark, and ensuring, I think as parents, we do it with our children's best interest at heart so that they, know that there is danger in the world, and also that in a way that they can understand it in a way that doesn't overwhelm them. So,
Yeah, I think that it's a good way to start. I mean, life is not an easy road, and it's good to start teaching kids from a young age. I think I'm not a parent myself, but, with children, you try to protect them, and having a way to kind of start slowly discussing different things. One of the things that we can't control is death. And so starting to talk about these scary books, what happens beyond, is a good way to start introducing that at whatever level the kid is ready to start processing.
I was behind on the slides. And also, the Grimm stories are still out there. We talk about all the time that Disney kind of took those stories and made them happy ending stories. Whereas, you can go read The Land of Stories and you still have Little Mermaid as sea foam, like as it was originally done in the story. Grimm's stories were like terrifying. So, it's also nostalgia. I am 10 months older than Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I grew up with those books, and that was like, and when I was a teacher, I still read those stories to my kids. They were fourth grade, so that was a little bit bigger. But I think nostalgia comes into that horror piece too.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely remember reading when I was a kid. I don't know who the author was, and I've tried in vain to find this book, but it scared the bejesus out of me. And it was about a teen runaway was ultimately murdered in the back of a bus. And it was not a gruesome book, but it stuck with me. And that sort of led me, to reading Lois Duncan. I love, I'm not really much on movies, like the horror movies. I like the safety of being, in a story, in a book where you can kind of take a breath if you need to. But that idea that, you can be in a world, and be afraid for the characters and feel that fear, and that visceral fear, was engaging to me from a very young age.
I was not a big horror reader when I was younger, but as far as the parents passing down, my mother is one of these people who reads 4 books a week still. She's 84. But she would find a book, and she loves thrillers. So she was the one who handed me Dean Koontz for the first time, and she handed me Silence of the Lambs. And then we knew that a movie was being made. So after we all read it, she, my sister, and I, we then tried to cast it ourselves, like who we thought should be, which I still do to this day. I think a lot of us do. So that kind of sharing of, especially the safety of my mom. My mom's like, you're not going to like this one, but you're probably going to like this one because I loved it. And you like dogs, so you'll like The Watchers, which she was right. So it's that sharing of knowing who's going to love it with you is, I don't know if it's nostalgia so much as just community.
I'm sure everybody in the room has known of Goosebumps, which I think is a lot of people's gateway. What's crazy is R.L. Stine is still going at it, making more books every year, which is crazy. I also think one of the things is we have very strong nostalgia, but even as we were growing up, there wasn't a ton of children's level scary stories. And what's incredible is the amount of really amazing literature that's been coming out recently. I know for me, I had very vivid memories of reading Carrie for the first time. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us were reading things that maybe people wouldn't consider age appropriate. Which, even to this day, for those who don't know, the Twisted Spine is a horror and dark literature bookstore completely. So that is what we have at the store. And so it's always interesting. We'll get into it later in the panel about what level kids are ready for. But it's very cool. And even some of the rep picks, that I've been here, there's been some really awesome children's middle grade YA books in that if you're looking for something that's not, you don't have to start with The Shining.
Yeah. And it's like the trend we see with romance in middle grade. They see their parents reading romance. They see their parents reading horror, and they're also going to be drawn to that. So that's that passed down too, is writing the age appropriate so that they're not jumping straight into The Stand. All right. We're going to talk about current state. Lauren.
Yeah. So we opened the Twisted Spine in September. I think, a lot of people are very cognizant that there's a huge boon of romance-specific bookstores that are opening up. But I think what a lot of people don't know is that horror is actually the second highest growing genre in literature. My background's science, so I threw down some stats if anybody's interested.
Do it.
The Nielsen book scan in the UK, they talked about how horror literature sales rose 54% in 22 and 2023. And then when they put out the study, it was in 2024. And in the first 3 months of 2024, it was already 34% higher. I'm waiting for more up-to-date statistics. I'm excited for the new studies to come out. And then also, if you look on a film perspective, horror is the number one genre in film and movies in terms of the fastest growing market. So there's definitely an appetite for it. And when I was talking to my partner, Jason, about moving forward with opening a brick and mortar, we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know if there would be an appetite. There's a couple. We are not the first horror specific bookstore. There are a couple other in the countries. There's some great ones in Canada. We started as a pop-up to see, what type of, community aspect there would be. And the response was overwhelming. People were so excited. They kept asking us where the brick and mortar was, which is one of the reasons why we decided to speed up our timeline and actually open up the brick and mortar. And then again, we were getting ready to open and everything, and we had an insane opening response, which we did not expect at all. It was wonderful, so lovely. There's a huge appetite in the horror community. And I also think that there's a really great opportunity from both children and adults alike. People who like scary stories might not necessarily consider themselves readers. And there's a really great opportunity to introduce people into stories they just haven't had an opportunity to realize, oh, I do like reading. I just haven't been given the right story yet. So far, it's been incredible. We're still a very young bookstore, but it's been absolutely overwhelming in the best way. Like, the community's been wonderful.
Yeah, I love that idea that they just they didn't know there were stories for them too. And then we have 2 publishers with us, and I would like you guys to tell us what you are seeing in the industry.
Well, I'm predominantly nonfiction, so that's where my lens always is. And I also am a local publisher. Everything we do at Arcadia is tied to a place somewhere in the country. So I'm noticing a huge uptick in other local stories across all publishers. It's a wonderful entree for any reader of any genre, really, to connect to the place they love or the place they live. And on the scary side, I've capitalized on this greatly in the past 5 years and have a whole series of middle grade books that are nonfiction tellings of why people think a place is haunted. And there's a lot of that cropping up around me, which is, fabulous for readers, alarming for me. So I got to get, spicier or more interesting. But I'm noticing a lot of First Nation stories that are really interesting, and stories that very, very niche are told in communities, but they're getting a bigger lens. They're getting more attention. Diversity across the board of race, gender, sexuality. Those are a lot of things in scary stories too, actually. But again, I focus mostly on the nonfiction. So I'm noticing a local and cultural boon.
Mm-hmm.
On my side, I'm noticing the trend of genre blending coming into both YA and to middle grade. One of the books I'm publishing in the summer is a horror YA novel in verse. And that the author, Rebecca Barrow, was able to put this kind of a magnetic story together in verse, was sort of like, it blew me away. But at the same time, really leaning into fantasy lore, like creating a whole lore for the book. Just the idea that horror isn't just one kind of category, and it can borrow and blend from other categories. And so you can see that as it's growing and the interest in the reads are growing, that authors are sort of flexing their creative muscles and doing more and stretching the category in really exciting ways. And which I think, has to happen. You have a book that sort of becomes a standard for a while, and people love that. And how do you improve upon the concept of the product? So I love when I see books coming into my submission inbox, and it's sort of like, this is it's a classic horror in one way, but here's how we've improved upon it. A lot of that comes across in taking on real world scenarios, particularly that children are dealing with and not knowing how to process. Unfortunately, I see a lot of horror that deals with school shootings, and that is, it's a real life horror, a real life fear that parents and kids have going into schools. And how do you put that into a story in a way that takes something that is ever present and makes it digestible, makes it something that you can feel brave about at the end of the story.
Doe was very good. I loved it. You should all read it. And then I think this was the first season where I had a rep talk to me about hormantasy. So it is starting to, I don't know what the final term is going to be, because that one doesn't sound great, but it is starting to go into and merge genres like we've seen with other genres. There was one more thing on this one, and it was the language we use to describe these stories. Does anyone want to speak to that?
We're referencing the article with the word spooky?
Yes.
Oh, Oh, so that's me. Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, I mean, we all talked about it.
We did all talk about it because it was very interesting.
Yeah. So when we were putting this panel together, I think it was initially called Spooky Stories.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? And I did raise a little bit of a concern about that. In terms of how we talk about the language that we use to talk about any book, really, and the word spooky comes from spook, which had been used as a slur for African Americans. And we are trying to be careful, particularly at my company, to make sure that whatever language that we use to describe stories is inclusive and doesn't, put up barriers for people who might really enjoy a story.
Yes. It was a really good discussion about like that history.
Yeah.
And there's a great article you can find on it too. Okay. Why do kids, monsters and ghosts and nonfiction, oh my, why do kids want to read horror? We kind of went over this, that they see their parents reading horror at home. They see their friends reading horror. Let's see. Choosing what to read gives kids agency. That's, I think, for all of us, if you are up here and you are a children's bookseller, that child's choice is the most important thing. It's, if they choose it, that's something that they're going to read. And they're going to, have that opportunity to choose their own book. I don't know. Do you guys have anything else on that?
I was just going to say, like, there are kids who just love scary stories. It's just, I don't know how many of you have experienced it, but, even my niece, when she was young, she always wanted, when she was like 3 years old, like, Dad, tell me a story about the woman losing her head. Sometimes you just have that morbid curiosity. And so having an opportunity to have those stories for those kids, again, is a great way to reach them. And I also think that, it just gives, like you were talking about, giving the kids agency, the ability to choose, and being there to provide an opportunity to have the stories for everyone.
Yeah, and I just want to add that for like booksellers and parents and teachers and librarians, I think we're past that sort of very rigid, like, no, that's not a good book for you. I think most people in this room agree that any book in a kid's hands is a good book. So that's what we're trying, like, the more fun and good and really good quality writing and interesting stories, regardless of the genre, but especially in a genre like scary stories where it might have been a taboo or something a parent or a librarian wouldn't want their a kid to read, is just to get past that and like make sure we celebrate the act of reading and really, really dive in. Like, okay, you like this one? Well, here's another one. And then you're building a reader, and that's the most important thing. And I love that there's such good scary stuff out there for the kids who love that, and they're being celebrated. They're not having to take it in a corner because someone's going to get in trouble.
And also, I think we touched on this, is the ability to talk about hard things. Like, life is hard right now, and kids are exposed to things at a younger age. We talked about, for us, it was like if you turned off the evening news, then, you would kind of have like a way of not having to see everything that's going on. But with all of the different stuff that's happening in the current climate, kids are just exposed to things at a much younger age. So having a safe place to talk about school shootings or other, things that are like going on in the world in like that. I mean, any children's panel talked about, a lot of times you're reading stories because you can't really have a conversation with your child, whether it's 5 years old or 15 years old. Like, having that opportunity to talk about something in the lens of a story, you're able to have those like more difficult conversations in a way that is like not as, you don't hit the wall as quickly when it's just trying to talk about something that's happening in real life. And that's something I really love about horror, is it's so much easier to digest real life situations in a format that feels safe. I mean, that's a lot of what horror is, building resilience to, the different types of horrors that are going on in real life, and like learning how to combat them in a safe and protected way.
And I just also add, you think, Nancy, you talked earlier about the community aspect of it. A lot of the authors on my list are invited to schools, and they participate in read-alongs, right? So it is a community activity where you can process hard things together. And the writing of these books is just it's gotten so good. And it's not just middle grade kids or YA readers that are coming to horror in the children's space. It's also adults. So I think that it's really something that is healing in a community aspect for a lot of different kinds of readers, even people who think that they're not horror readers. I think a lot of what's on the market right now provides a lot of entry points for people who don't think that they would want to be in that kind of headspace.
And, I just kind of thought about it as we're talking about this because it is a genre that's newer. I think we have to think about the conversation we're having with the parents and grandparents and librarians that are coming into, like we did with graphic novels. We have to have those talking points when they come and they say, I just don't think that that's appropriate for my child. And you need to have those talking points like we do with other, sections that kids want to read. It's like, yes, they want to talking about how it makes them feel, be safe in a scary place and all those things. But just thinking about that before you're hand selling those books to a family. Because I think that will help the kid get the book that they need. We're going to talk about different kinds of scary stories now. Okay, so nonfiction on the list. I understand that I Survived is not actually technically nonfiction, but it has that nonfiction aspect to it where kids can live through that scary times that have happened in the past and scary times that have happened more recently. I mean, the ones that are coming out now are just in the last couple of years. And so it gives the kids a chance to live through those like disasters without actually living through the disaster. And then you have a lot of nonfiction titles.
I do. So the Spooky America series that I publish is they're journalistic. It's a journalistic approach. So we're not telling ghost stories so much as talking about why people in a place think something's haunted. This valley is haunted. This building is haunted. And why would that be haunted? Well, during the Civil War, this was a battleground, or during the Revolution, soldiers billeted here, or, they found a body in the 1930s here and they're trying to figure out why. So we get to tell the history of a place through their ghosts. And it's why people hear, the lights flicker on and off, or the door slams, or the furniture gets moved around. We have a Pittsburgh one and a Southwest Pennsylvania one, both of which feature ghosts. I mean, the Cathedral of Learning is haunted top to toe. And it's really fun to learn about that. It's a significant building. It does wonderful things for the university, for the community. And yet it's got these great stories that go back to the 1600s. Like somebody's ghost was a socialite whose dad banished her. It's a whole thing. But so we get to tell those fun stories, but it really connects that kind of fantastical, a lot of paranormal-ish stuff to real things that happened. And again, if we're talking about processing horrors that are happening now, it's like, don't let history repeat itself. Well, there's Underground Railroad stories. There's a lot of war stories. A lot of soldiers never, ever pass to the other side, and they like to haunt. Every lighthouse you've ever been to is haunted, by the way. So it's neat. It's a lot of fun, but it's also fascinating. And it's an entry point. And actually, another talking point to grandparents and parents who are like, this is not appropriate. It's like, well, actually, you will learn so, like, at least for my series, but a lot of them, the I Survives are a terrific example of fiction, but you learn so much of important history through this delightful road of scariness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about ghosts and monsters now, too. I know a lot of these titles on the screen right now are yours, Stacy.
Yes. My authors seem to love the ghosts and the monsters. But I think that personifying, real life horrors or things that are scary using the monster motif can be really useful. One of my authors, Ayanna Gray, in the Beast of Bray series, did just that, where these were teenagers who were facing real life monsters, but the monsters always represented something in the world that was hard to tackle. Mm-hmm. What I loved about the way Ayanna did it is that it was also about community and how do we do this together? How do we figure this out together? And that understanding that you do not have to face scary things, you do not have to face the monsters alone, I think is a really important thing for any reader to kind of take away from any horror. I also talk about how not all horror is good horror. And this is very particular to taste, of course. Like, again, like I watched The Quiet Place, and that still lives in my head rent free and not in a good way. Very well done movie, but I didn't go away from that movie feeling good about the world or my ability to fight back against the hard things. And I think that that's very, very necessary. Earlier I mentioned like Lois Duncan, but I also realized another entry point for me for horror was The Twilight Zone. And I still watch those marathons when they come on. When I was a kid, I had a black and white TV, so I didn't realize that The Twilight Zone was actually in black and white. So that sort of like added to the eeriness of it for me. But at the end of every episode, there was always some nugget to take away, some life nugget. One of the ones I remember clearly, and you may as well, being readers in the room, is the one where this guy, all he wanted was all the time in the world to read books. And by the time we get to the end of that episode, he's got the time and all the books, and he accidentally crushes his glasses. And it's like, oh no, like he can't. To this day, right? It's like, oh my God. And I always think about that. It's like, you cannot put off for tomorrow what you can do today. Like, and that A Twilight Zone kind of taught me that, like when I was 10. So that's for me. I want to have a takeaway from something that I'm reading that is horror based, or even if I'm looking at it on the screen. If it doesn't make me feel powerful, it doesn't make me feel like I have an action step or something to take away, and how to ultimately live my life and feel hopeful, then for me, that's not good horror.
I will jump in and just say that, like, it is a matter of taste. I think a lot of people like the morality, like, that comes with the horror things, but it's also okay if you just want a story where it's just kind of silly and fun and weird. Like, I think it's really important, and especially as we're teaching things with kids, I totally see like that. But I will also say, like, in the adult market, like, probably the number one request I get is like, what is the scariest book that you have in your store? Like, some people do just want that for shock value's sake. And like, I'm sure there will be kids who just want blood and guts at their level. And that's okay too. For us, like, I also think that as booksellers, it's important not to try and, keep people from like what they want to read. And so obviously we don't want to be spreading like hatred or, bigotry, but like, it's also okay to like, lean into things that might be like a little bit sillier, like than everything. Like, so that's just my own personal opinion with it too.
Yeah. I think you have to know your reader, and we are all, that's why we're here, is to learn who our reader is and see what they actually are looking for and what's going to help, what they're looking for. Lauren, in your story, you're grown-ups and kids, right?
Yes.
What do you mainly focus on in your kids section?
We try to have, I will say like our strongest market is adults. I think that like, we're still working on expanding our children's section. And one of the things we were talking about is like with YA, I've actually found adults gravitating towards the YA. And so we have like our board book, picture book, middle grade all in one area, but we actually made the decision to keep YA integrated into the store. The example I love to use is Clown on a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. It's an excellent book. It is technically YA, but if you want to watch the horror movie, it is a rated R movie. So it's kind of interesting based upon, how things get marketed or picked up or whatever. And so I try not to put too much on the YA list, because I think it's mostly like, it's probably how much sexual content is in it and like how graphic is the actual scene, even though, someone might be getting caught up, getting killed by a killer clown. So for us, that was kind of a major decision that we made, and I still stand by that. I think it's for everyone. But it is, we like to have the middle grade and the board books separated.
That makes sense. we also talked about a lot, and when we were doing this, talking about this panel, is the social emotional learning that happens through when children read, and especially genre reading, especially. So we feel like horror really helps them, and we've already said this in a couple different ways, but it really helps them process their life, what they're going to go through, what they're seeing, and it gives them a way to know that in the end they're going to come out of it safe. And so we think that's a really great thing that horror does for young readers and middle grade readers. Does anyone else have kind of hit on that already? Yeah. Okay. This is just a whole list of reasons that they like. I think we've hit on all of them. It reminds kids that they can be brave and they can do hard things because they've already helped a character do that by reading the book.
Oh yeah. Again, as the scientist, I was saying that there's a lot of studies showing that people that gravitate towards horror have higher empathy than your average person, which is something I think really interesting. And I definitely see in our customer base, they're honestly the kindest, most wonderful, community that we could have. And it's probably because a lot of this time you're reading stuff that's talking about death constantly. So you are kind of always in touch with your own morality. And it's kind of a good reminder that time is short and be kind to everyone.
And going back to the point of the softer horror to the harder horror, kids learn what is right for them. Like they learn where their line is. Because I know that I have booksellers that they'll read something that I suggest and they'll be like, nope, that one was too gory. And I'm like, okay, good to know. So the kids learn what's right for them. Okay, so let's see.
Oh, wait, the one other thing about the social emotional learning that we talked about, and we mentioned community, is again, I think especially on the younger end, so middle grade, and even a little younger, but if not everybody likes horror. And it's certainly not something your teacher is giving you for a class. Like maybe the teacher's giving it to you to bring home. But when you start reading those, and I remember this from middle school, it was like the one girl, Michelle Blecker, who read, again, somebody who read, she constantly had a book in her hand. She was the first one to dig into V.C. Andrews. And then the book went around and somebody else got it each day at lunch or each week. And you find your people, and maybe they're not your best friend. Maybe they're not on the soccer team with you, but you have something in common. And it helps. I think during our practice chat, I said, let your freak flag fly. Mm-hmm. You find your fellow, horror lovers. And that community is something that's really important. And it's important for kids to understand that even if their mainstream life is here, they also love this other thing. And there's other people who love that other thing. And it's an empathy thing. It's like, we're all very similar, and I can love the same thing that somebody I might not talk to at school also loves, and therefore we also can be friends. And it's that bigger building of community, even in small, subtle ways. And I think horror as a genre is a real driver of that because it is sort of fringy. Mm-hmm. It's at least, it's getting less fringy, but still it's one of those like, oh, wait, you like that? Oh my God, so do I. Yeah. And that's so great for kids who are 10, 11, and 12 and just sort of figuring things out.
It's all about the outsider, right? Like the allegory, sometimes the monster is the hero, in these scary stories. Like it's all about kids who feel kind of other in whatever way, like, whether it's, gender expression, sexuality, anything like that. Like there's a lot, we get allegories constantly of different types of things, whatever type of political thing you're talking about. It's so helpful. Yeah,
mine was after V.C. Andrews. It was Christopher Pike. We pass those ones around too. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about determining age appropriateness, just because you don't want to hand something that's going to traumatize a child, right? How do we determine what's age appropriate? I'm going to always say, talk to the kid. Like, find out what they're reading, find out what they like, find out what they don't like. What do you guys have?
Well, I'll say in the editing process, I'm working on a horror book. If something makes me uncomfortable, I have to dig into first why it makes me uncomfortable. And then I talk to the author about it. And for me, it has to have a reason, a narrative reason for existing. If it's just for shock value, then it feels like it's just for shock value. And it doesn't feel organic. And then I think the reader is not going to process it in the way that you really want them to. Sometimes, when authors are taking first stabs at scenes, things can feel a little cartoony or over the top. And so then you actually lose the tension and the potential for that jump scare. So I always ask my authors and myself, like, is this necessary for the story? And how is it that you really want the reader to feel in this moment? And if the answer is you want them to feel afraid, okay, and is there a story value there? And is the execution something that's actually going to make a reader afraid? For middle grade, which is where most of my horror has been, I tend to steer writers away from going too gory, because you don't want, again, you just don't want certain things living in a kid's head, 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, if they're not ready for that. Mm-hmm. There are other books, there are older books, like, I was an advanced reader when I was growing up. I went, straight for Stephen King at some point, right? When I was ready for that. I think that kids will work with their educators, librarians, and their parents to sort of know what they're ready for. And I also work hard to ensure that the copy is as informative for a parent or a teacher as possible, so that they know what they're getting into.
I have a very unique situation where I'm trying to tell history via ghost stories. So actually my problem is mostly making sure it's not boring, because sometimes it just is. So we do gore, but we don't do, because our stories are less, we're really more paranormal, like in my series, where it's like ghosts are visiting. But it's the same thing. Is this so disturbing that, like, if we don't ever include in our book stories of rape or incest, or like a parent absolutely butchering their family, or a child butchering if a child perpetrator back in the 1800s, whenever, we just won't tell that story. That's too disturbing for our readership, I think, or I don't want to plant that seed in their little heads. So we try to make it fun while also informing and telling history. So there's many layers. So I think our books are more potentially disturbing. And again, it's the same thing. It's like, am I creeped out by this? Then I'm going to dial it back. Or is this so dull because it's just a good, story about this building? How do we zhuzh it up? So it's an interesting balance. But I think the meter of, would I want my kid reading this? And I have a middle grade reader and a high school reader. And so it's like, if I'm nervous about them reading it or I don't like it, then it probably shouldn't be in the book.
Yeah, I think the age appropriateness, it's interesting because there's kind of the two levels with when you're doing a scary story. You have what reading level is the child at, which is, anytime they walk into a bookstore, whichever you're trying to figure out. And then it's what is the child comfortable with. My partner's nephew, for example, he's got one at 11 and one at 7. And the one at 11 does not like scary things. Even though he's at the higher reading level, he will not want the same level of scary that the 7-year-old will want. So it is an interesting challenge, I think, when you have the kid come to your store and they're saying, okay, I want to get a story. You do have to both talk to the kid, talk to the parent or whoever's with them. And it's a little bit of a more of a two-factor, like finding the right reading and also finding the right scary level. So it's fun. I mean, honestly, going through finding the right book.
Right. And I think if you give them the different levels of scary, they can also help you guide them. You can give them, the choices of, this is a little bit scary, this one is scary, but this one is really scary. And then they can kind of guide where they go from there, and you can kind of watch where their interest is lying. I think too, a lot of good scary books, a lot of good middle grade books, period, right now, trust the kids to deal with hard things. And that is what I love about middle grade, is that they have the faith that kids can deal with some things that are a little bit scary, a little bit hard, and move through them. And so that's kind of what you introduce here too. So we have some examples of, little bit scary, really very scary in terms of what you could hand a child, right? These are just ones I came up with, but there's so many. And they have scary in every level, which is what I love too. They have it in picture books. I mean, you had the Olive Jeffers, There's a Ghost in This House. That is such a good book. And you have beginning chapter books that are just a little bit scary. You don't want, terrify kids to death, but the Erie Elementary School is like good, right? Like that's a good one for kids. They have them in graphic novels now. They have Blood in the Water. If you've not read that one was fantastic. And it's pretty scary, and it's got murder in it, and it trusts kids to be able to deal with that. And Creepy Crayon and any of his new chapter books are so good. Pretty Ugly. Have you guys read that one? David Sedaris. That one trusts kids to be able to deal with some pretty exciting things in it. First ever, yeah. But then you can have cozy horror too, because you've got Zombie and Brainer Friends, right? Like, and then there's some. I think the Scratch was on. It's coming out soon. It's not out yet. What do you guys have for like scary, not scary, or little scary, medium scary, high scary?
Ooh. We were talking about, you've got the Creepy Crayons. We were just talking about like with the rep pick, they've got the new Creepy Carrots. It starts as the picture book and then it moves into the middle grade, which is really cool. One of the things we were talking about is also like kids like to read the same scary stuff over and over again. So it's cool seeing these like different publishing where it's starting at like even a lower level and then continuing that kind of the same level of scary into like a higher reading level. So that's kind of nice. They can continue with the level they're comfortable with. Those are really great. There's a Tapioca Press has some really great ones. There's like, that are like light scary. Like the Lighthouse Keeper is kind of eerie. It's not too overtly scary. And then they have like Aldo the Ghost Dog. Sometimes the scary stuff is almost a little bit more sad. Like it's a little bit not so jump scare, but it's more like dealing with grief, which is also helpful. Those are some of those ones are really great. And then you get into like, honestly, Goosebump can even be kind of the middle scary, or some people consider very scary depending on the art that's on the front. We were at a panel with R.L. Stein, and he says, the thing he hears the most is the kids have to turn the book over so they can go to sleep at night. And it's like not so much this story inside, but actually just like the art is what creeps them out.
That's scary stories to tell in the dark too.
Yeah.
I'm not the right one to ask.
Okay.
I'm so mired in my nonfiction and my histories.
Well, I agree with Bob Stein. We were talking about that earlier. I think that is a great, perfect entry point for any reader who's wanting to experience horror. And he has it at all levels. It's really amazing that he is still going and has these are really original, great stories. I also, again, I like the books that blend genres. So looking at my own list, like Ayanna Gray, that we didn't actually even bill as a horror series, but there were some horrific things in it. It was more like this, here's a fantasy thriller. But the monster aspect, I think, qualifies it for something, to take a look at.
Yeah, and they're sorry.
I do have one.
Yeah.
Do it.
Just as a sort of genre bending is to choose your own adventures.
Yeah.
Because invariably you die. You do something stupid and you fall off a cliff or whatever. So those, and they're making a comeback and more people are doing that kind of thing. So from, I would say that was like a medium scary kind of place where, again, it's sort of nonfiction-y, but because you're doing a thing, but it really taps into your decisions and dealing with death and dealing with risk.
And if you don't want to die, you just go back to the other one and make the other choice.
Right, you just redo it.
Like that's, and there's great. I mean, like it's moving into graphic novels. There's the Goosebumps is now being done in graphic novel form, which is really great. There's The Sleepover. That was a really great horror for middle grade graphic novel. But yeah, The other thing that we kind of talked about a little bit that leans a little into the nonfiction is, do we think we're going to see true crime in the middle grade genre? And I thought about it. I'm like, well, I was fascinated by Lizzie Borden. Is that like true crime?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys think that true crime's going to be a middle grade thing?
I'm desperate to do it. And we sort of do a little bit in my series, and we're exploring more of it. Because at Arcadia, on the adult side, we have tons of true crime. So adapting for younger grades is something I'm looking into very, very actively right now. It's just there's that line of what is fun and creepy and interesting and what's like awful and terrifying. Yeah. So my current gauge is like there has to be at least 75 to 100 years since that crime happened. And then you can bring that true crime to kids today. I think there's a distance there where it seems old-timey or so far away that it's not that awful. So I'm big into like train heists right now.
Do you think like the Hazardous Tales, like Dawn or Dinner Party, is that like true crime kind of? Right?
Well, yeah, derivative. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Anyone have any last thoughts? Kids love scary. If you don't have someone on staff who's into that, maybe dip your toe.
Hi, this is Jen from White Whale from Pittsburgh. Anyway, I really like the idea of the gender blending, especially because I don't read horror, but I did read Blood, Water, and I was asking particularly Stacy about horror that also deals with maybe, in that there were some inequities and things about social justice or racism in horror, if that's a thing at all.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, there's two thoughts that I have about it. The first thought is, like for the book that I'm here to represent, Doe, that is about a Black girl. Doe by Rebecca Barrow. That's about a Black girl, but it's not a social justice story, right? And I think that we also need to be responsible for putting out stories that feature characters of color, feature Black kids that have nothing to do with, social justice or trauma, and can just be a fun story. And so that's what I love about Doe, is that there's these Black characters that are, being really awful to each other and having a lot of, like mean girl sort of fun. And it has nothing to do with the race. These characters just happen to be Black. At the same time, yes, I think that there is plenty of room for books that do take on race and horror at the same time. The market has definitely taken its cues from movies like,
The Peele.
Yeah, Jordan Peele. Like I've used that comp and positioning lines so many times. Tiffany Jackson, I definitely think is an author who's going after that market in a particular way. So, there's room for lots of different entry points or ways of engaging horror from an aspect of race, from a gender, sexuality. The characters in Doe are also queer.
So I have like a question about for me, and then a question. So Stacy, this is kind of directed at you. You said something about good and bad horror. So the question for me is, I don't really read horror, so where should I start? Like if I would just want to read something, let's go with scary, not somewhat, not very. And then the question is, as a book buyer, how do I tell what has some morality at the end of it and doesn't?
Well, I'd look at the copy.
Okay.
At the back of an ARC that you get and see how this case for me, I write my copy. So the editor has chosen to end the copy. I always try to ensure readers at the end of the copy that there's some hope, there's some light at the end of the tunnel, that things end up okay in the end. There's some redemption. The kids are safe. I think in terms of like where you should start as a reader, I think start in several different places, right? In your bookstore services all ages. Yeah. And have you read Bob Stein? Yeah. So I'd start there. I'd go the kind of the level that she's put out, like, is it scary? Very scary, really scary, right? And have you read Stephen King? Like, for me, that's on the very.
So I am real. I'm totally like a winner. So I don't read him. I've seen some of his movies. The only book I read of his freaked me out so much.
Oh, which one?
Believe it or not, it was Thinner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, so, and I know it was a short story, so that's the other thing.
Can I ask what do you like to read? Like what genre do you usually?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with this. I'm here as a book buyer.
Well, I just mean like you can find a subgenre. We were talking about like horror blends, right? So like my mom does not like horror at all, and she's like, "Oh my god, my daughter opened a horror bookstore." What? But she loves historical.
So I do too.
So like
Oh my God.
the one
I do too.
I always recommend is Lone Women by Victor LaValle.
Oh, so good.
It's mostly historical. Like I would say like 90%.
But that's a grown-up one too, just
grown
so
up,
you know.
yes, grown up
That's-
book, not kids. Lone Women by Victor LaValle. Excellent book. It's not too scary, like for again adult. But it's like ways to also like the way that we have our bookstore set up is that horror does have subgenres in it, and so if you also can figure out what you like to read, if you're historical, if you're a romance, if you're cosmic or whatever, you can also find the sub horror in that, and that helps a lot too. Or literary. Like we have a lot of things people are like, this is horror. And I'm like, is it disturb you? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, then that's horror, right? Like,
Okay.
And in the kids in the middle grade, if you're looking specifically in the middle grade section, you can find that like middle scary that's kind of sweet. Like I think V. Schwab's City of Ghosts is perfect for kids who just want a little or scary. Sorry. Yeah.
Along the lines of this discussion, I think asking the child or the adult, if you were helping the adults, what is scary to you? Paranormal and ghosts are not scary to me at all. As a matter of fact, when those get introduced, I'm checked out. So to me, it needs to feel realistic, more of a murder or something that feels more believable to me. But I think for kids, if you ask, what TV shows have you liked or movie, or was there something that you kind of liked, trying to find out what that element was? But my main purpose for my question or my taking the mic is a public service announcement telling you to be prepared for anything. Because at our bookstore, it's rare that our booksellers are speechless, but we had a third grader, 8-year-old boy, come up and he was there with his mother. He came to one of our booksellers and said, okay, I need 3 things in my books. I want violence, I want nudity, and I need language. And they were speechless. And the mom was there. She didn't hear it. So our bookseller, like, Katie, can you help me pick out something? And he said the exact same thing to her. I think kids with technology and the web and movies they're seeing. So we weren't prepared for that kind of question. I'm not sure what he eventually got recommended.
Yeah, I don't.
we get that a lot, actually. It's funny. You get kids who want the like middle grade stuff, and then we have the ones it's like, I've already read every Stephen King, and it's a 6-year-old, and you're like, okay, and then you're trying to find something similar. Or we also have like a dark romance section, and we have some like 12-year-old girls reading Haunting Adeline, and I'm just like, okay, like, I'm just trying not to be, just be there, support reading.
Yeah, and we have a lot of kids who come in and they're like, I want to read it, and I'm like, how about some what's like K.R. Alexander has a good series that looks like it, that usually will satisfy that, because third grade it is not. But you also have to remember, because I'm a former educator too, and I would watch, kids will only get what they get. So if there's something in that book that is a little too scary for them, a lot of times it's like romance. It just goes right over their head. They don't even like see it. Sometimes not. Sometimes it lives with you forever. But for the most part, they self-censor themselves, and we have to trust them to be able to do that too.
I am not a horror reader, but I know I need to venture into it so I understand it and can make good recommendations. I agree with you. We have a Chilling Chapters book group, and the group picks their books. They are the nicest, most loyal readers, all of that. But they read books about eating other people, and it just
Cannibalism is a trope.
I have asked them multiple times to explain it. My opportunity is that in the store, because my booksellers are very engaged and because kids usually come with family members or others to pick out books, I feel like it can have a wide range and we can address that. I do book fairs with 11 elementary schools in our community. Kids are always asking me for scary books. Yep. If we take something that they're going to take home because they got to choose it with the money that they brought to book fair, that someone at home decides isn't appropriate, all of that, then it's not so much the price that I might pay in reputation. It's more what happens at the school, because the school's benefiting from it. It's their book fair. So then if those parents make it difficult for the librarians we work with or the teachers or whatever, I'm uncomfortable with that. So I'm trying to find this safe, scary to take for kids to pick that may not create too many of those circumstances.
Can I ask what state you live in?
Indiana. Bright red Indiana.
I'm from Idaho, so I get it.
Yeah. And my community generally is very supportive. And honestly, the children who can bring money to shop at book fair, their parents or their families, whoever's at home is going to be pretty open-minded about things. But we also don't like to see so many kids go away without a book. So we have a donation fund and we give vouchers to children so that they can pick something out. And that's where I feel like if they pick something they really want that's scary and they got the gift from us or from school, I just don't want to create problems for my school partners.
Right. I mean, I would ask the teachers that you're working with, what state, what's on the state list. Every state has a state award list for books, with the middle grade, YA level, picture book level. And so there might already be books that are just state sanctioned already, that you might not get the pushback on that you're expecting, just because the whole state has already kind of ordered those books.
And for the most part in middle grade, you are going to find a couple that are like super scary, but they're not. You just have to peruse them and make sure that there's not any like kids turning into Pop-Tarts, because that's the one that sticks with me. But we have to end. Oh, I'm so sorry. But if you have any more questions, we're going to be up here. Thank you so much. Fill out the survey. Tell us what we could do better. Tell us what you liked. Thank you. Thank you guys. You guys did great.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!